Well, good afternoon, second try. My name is Sanda Lenzholzer. I will host this session. I'm a professor in landscape architecture at Wageningen University, and I'm very happy to have the opportunity to talk to Helle and to Cynthia. Because we are all working on the topic of public space, on urban design, on landscape architecture. So I feel very honored to have the opportunity to discuss. And I'm also very happy to hear that there are so many people in the public, more than 200, I learned from Jorge. I would also like to use this opportunity to thank Jorge for this amazing organization. It's really great how you're doing this and how you make this conference possible, really. Before we go into the normal discussion part of this, please, Helle and Cynthia, just give me the opportunity to announce something for the associates. Maybe many of you have heard it, but there is an associate meeting tomorrow at 12:30. So all the PLEA associates, please join for that meeting. So hopefully see you at lunchtime there. Now you had very interesting talks, my dear colleagues, and there were a lot of questions and comments, as you saw. And I have tried to kind of organize them a little bit already, because I saw there were different types of questions. And I think if we can squeeze all this into 1 hour of discussion, or at least until 5, I would like to go through, let's say, 3 major topics. First of all, I noticed that there were some specific questions about understanding things, or that people want some more explanation about something. So I would like to go through these matters first. Then we come to, let's say, more general questions and points of discussions that arose. And eventually I noticed, there were a lot of overarching questions. Of course, how do we deal with the post-carbon city? And also what arose, and very tightly connected, is what does COVID mean in that context? So I would like to see into these matters together with you at the end of our talk, if you allow. But maybe you have any ideas how you want to structure the discussion as well, or are you fine with this? So I'd like to hear from you if this is
that sounds fine to me. Absolutely.
Yeah, for me too, Sanda. Whatever you catch, we follow your questions.
Okay. Yeah, because discussions in these kind of conditions are very different. And normally, we interact with the public, and now it's we have to pick up stuff from the chats, etc. And I would like to ask everyone, please excuse me when I cannot take into account all the questions or all the comments. I have been trying to see into what really matters for this topic. I noticed there was a lot of things about materials and plastic that is not so much under the umbrella of urban design. So please allow me to not go deeper into these things, and so that we keep a little bit of focus on this. Then I think without further ado, I would like to bring forward some questions for Cynthia regarding the tool that you developed about assessing, let's say, livability and so forth. There were some questions about how did you, let's say, operationalize all these different metrics. People use the term metrics, or so how did you do that? Because you showed us a map that showed us, I don't know, with small kind of grids, indicators indicating the way how you assess the livability. But can you maybe expand a little bit on especially how you assess things that are not so easily measurable, like when we talk about urban climate, we can simulate all that. But when you're talking about accessibility of, for elderly people, or when you talk about accessibility of shops, and there were many things that would be interesting to have some indication of how you measured that.
Of course. Okay, Sanda. Yes, first of all, because I think that it is good to mention that this methodology I developed in 2004, more or less. So by that moment was really difficult to have all these variables. So mainly the aim of the assessment was how we can actually. It was when I was collaborating in the Urban Ecology Agency of Barcelona. So. There was a huge interest on how we can give the message to policy makers about the benefits that you have when you pacify streets. So one of the main aspects that I based the first of all to have an intentional model. So that's the way that I focus on the ergonomic, the attractiveness, the psychological aspects that we can take into account, and this variable about the proximity. So mainly there were 4 group of variables that, from my perspective, have an incidence on planning. And this is important because I think it was finally to have some inputs, then to identify whether your sidewalks are not wide enough, your and the accessibility it's not well resolved by the urban planning. So the metrics, there was a huge work of characterization of this data with a GIS system. So for example, for all the accessibility, the percentage of pedestrian areas regarding for the cars, all of this is based by measuring on the cartographic data. So that implies a lot of time, a lot of digitalization. Then, for example, for the attractiveness, one of the things that we used to work on the agency was on complexity and diversity. So it's true that we count with the basis of the organization of the economical activity with a classification. So we only traduce this indicator whether in each street. So the basis is that all the variables then were characterized in order to have them by each street, tram of a street. So then when we make the intersection into the grid, because, for example, all the proximity, it has a wider scale. No? So, for example, if you have all the public facilities, so how many population you have. So all these data, we organize it in order to have it by each street. So then you can count and have, for each variable, we establish a set of parameters to understand which is the satisfied level and which is the optimal level, because I think it was important to establish these 2 levels. For example, accessibility. You can ensure the accessibility if you have 1.8 meters, but this is not enough. I mean, this is just the sufficient according to the law. But then, if you have more than 5 meters, then this is in an optimal situation. So, in each one of the variables, there was an exercise to see, of course, according to our experience in the cities that we have been working. Then, I think that because it was in one of the questions of the colleagues on the chat, obviously, every time that we repeat this method in different urban fabrics, in different contexts, then you realize that whether these parameters, the evaluation parameters, could probably have a difference, especially for the climate. So then the variables regarding to the comfort levels, the 3 of them, they were based on simulation. So we export simulation results in the noise and air quality or thermal comfort into the GIS. So it implies a lot of work of characterizing, but finally I think it was a very comprehensive tool, especially to identify whether you need more green, whether you need to reduce asphalt, whether you need to increase, you have the opportunity to increase green, and at the same time to understand that sometimes there are contrasting things. For example, maybe in an historical center, there are very narrow streets, so probably you are not able to have trees because there's not enough space. But that doesn't mean that probably your the attractiveness it is among the activity that it is in there. So I think it was for me it has been a good tool to put in debate whether and to identify which are the principal gaps and the opportunities that each place can have in terms of livability.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is already giving us a bit more of a picture how you got, let's say, to these maps. So this was very informative. Thank you. And just one little follow-up question on that. When you developed this tool, did you also take into account other kind of measuring tools, assessment tools, like, you know, the BREEAM, LEED, they have been starting to assess outdoor spaces as well? Or was that, I think that was before that time, right?
Yes, it was before. But for example, one thing that Helle mentioned, and it's to link this to the number of people that walks on. So this, what we have the experience, not for a whole city, but in pilot areas. So we have the opportunity to count people and to see a little bit like observation of public space. So that was, yes, we have the opportunity to see that. Probably, I mean, it's more a qualitative analysis that I think that complements. For me, it's, I mean, I wouldn't put it in an opposite, because each part, it is helpful depending on what of the parts of the project we're dealing with. And it is important to see on the metrics, and which is, but you always have to make an analysis of the site, as always. I mean, it's a tool. Having the data, it's a tool, but then you have to link it to your diagnosis and what happens in there, seeing how the public space is functioning.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I think we as designers can all subscribe to that. That, you know, the local analysis is also very important, and to really zoom in. Helle, in connection to this topic, you also told us about the research that you're doing with Gehl in different countries. And how, I mean, you mentioned some things. You're doing, I think, some citizen science using citizens to measure something, and you said something, we use social media. And can you tell us a little bit more about, yeah, how you're trying to, let's say, make the assessments of these spaces before you start designing? Because your presentation was very inspiring and very interesting in terms of what are we doing, how do we respond to that, but how are you making the basis? Because obviously you do in your office.
Well, you could say that in addition to all the tools that Cynthia is mentioning here, and the livability indexes that more and more cities are working with, we are really trying to excel within the field of public life mapping. So that is our sort of core focus area, and public life mapping is really about pedestrian movements. It's about people activities in the public space, what is actually going on in the space, at what time during the day, during the week, during the year. We also look at age and gender and cultural backgrounds, so that we have more insights into inclusion and diversity. and those are just some of the sort of ways that we are mapping what is actually going on inside or between the buildings, you could say. We are testing the use of sensors, but there is an awful lot of challenges, I think, when it comes to getting access to setting up sensors in public spaces. Obviously, there is a lot of sensors already inside of shops and inside of station areas, and we can get a lot of big data sets from public transportation agencies or from other companies that we are collaborating with. So we do get access also to big data sets like that. But to go really deep, you could say, and understand how a space or an area is being used, you actually have to do something very old-fashioned, like going out into the spaces and doing old school observational studies, really sort of urban ethnography, where you spend time, you observe what is going on, you make a map of what is happening, and you also can do very deep dive interviews with a number of people by doing that. To support those, you could say, traditional ways of surveying, we have also developed an app that is very easy to share, and that means that we can now train many more people virtually, and we can manage surveys at a distance, where we and that has been especially helpful under the COVID pandemic, where we were not necessarily able to travel to all the places, but then we could share an app and we could train a number of people in a municipality, for example, as to how they could go out themselves and collect this data. We've also developed what we call a public life protocol, which is, you could say, a standardization system of how to collect public life data. And that protocol is sort of open source, and people can download that from our website, so that if more people are interested in starting to collect this type of data, if we collect it in the same way, in a standardized way across cities and developers and so forth, we can actually have more shareable data, more comparable data. So that's a small sort of offering that we have tried to develop in order to make sure that the public life data is actually comparable from across cities.
Yeah,
we've also started to look more into social media, as I was mentioning, where we can get access to anonymized sets of data, and we can see what people are interested in, for example, in certain areas, and what people share about certain places. And that gives us indications about what people are interested about in certain districts in a city, or if there are particular interesting places in the city that are cross-pollinary, meaning sort of where a lot of different people of different minds are meeting. So those, I think, are really the core public life type surveys that we are trying to excel in. And then we are combining that, you could say, with relatively traditional analysis of the quality of the public space. And of that, Professor Gehl has written about those 12 quality criteria that we are using in his book, Cities for People. And that's really 12 qualities that are looking into different physical qualities of public spaces, and that's everything from people needing to feel protective, to 6 criteria that deals with people's level of comfort, to another sort of 3 quality criteria that has to do with aesthetics and design and what we call the human scale of the area, how much we can actually as human beings relate to the design and the architecture of a place. And those are the 2 most important elements that we try to document and to survey. But then, of course, as I mentioned in my presentation, everything that has to do with context, understanding the wider city, you could say, is also where you can gather a lot of data. Social demographics, for example, economic backgrounds and other things that can tell you something about the wider city. And then not least, the democratic representation of people in process is another thing that we look into. So it's really about life, space, context, and representation.
Yeah. Just going on about this, I don't want to make it too long, the questions about all the assessment tools, but people were, responding to that in the chats, and there are several people who are working or trying also to improve and to push further these kind of standards for outdoor space assessment, like LED, BREEAM. And I feel that many things that Cynthia has developed before, that they are partly already in there. But Helle, what is your vision on including, let's say, especially all these social life factors in there? Do you think it's necessary, or it makes sense, or shall we say, leave these tools for what they are, and we try to make a good, analysis on these factors and a good site analysis, as Cynthia also mentioned. So what's your view on that?
I agree. I do think that a lot of the systems that we make use of, BREEAM, LEED, the German DNB system and so forth, I do think that these systems could be improved and further developed when it comes to these social and public life aspects. A few years back, about 6 years ago, we actually started a non-profit Gehl Institute with the purpose of advocating for public life to become something that you would demand or ask for when you set up architecture briefs, when you demand or design programming for existing or new areas, and I think there is definitely something that we can do in order to take those social concerns into our design. And in fact, I would go so far and say that we really need it. I mean, now, especially with the times of COVID, we see that as I was mentioning, loneliness is on the rise in our cities. We see obesity and inactivity is on the rise. Also because of COVID, people have not been able to exercise and get out as much as they used to. So we have some issues in our society and the way that our urban spaces are designed that are just those crises, those problems are just becoming bigger right now. So especially now, we need to make sure that those issues are considered in our design and our RFPs and other things that are coming out. Yeah.
How do you think about this, Cynthia?
Absolutely. And I was thinking that probably, I mean, it's when you're dealing with variables, with indicators, and it's you like that, but you have also to realize that not to forget to observe and this what you were saying before, and as architects or urban planners, it is necessary to observe and to make a diagnosis as in the old way. I mean, I insist that it's a complementary tools. I mean, it's useful to also know and to be familiar to the number of cars that are going there, to be familiar to the decibels and the particles, the pollution particles that you have, because then you are aware. So this is form part of the knowledge that it is also useful to have it, you know, or the dimension or the density of activity that you have. I mean, it's very useful, but obviously, and I think that even before COVID, the tendency is about having more in an individual. I mean, society, it's a very individual society, the in developed countries especially. So I think that we must enhance the collective sense, not only in cities but in general. But I mean, the way that we can be more resilient over the time, it's when we make it useful this community network that we can establish. I mean, isolated systems, the tendency is to broken. So in the sense that we work more in a connected and in a positive way, in the sense of a common well for everyone, I think it's and public space. I think it's the very natural space of interaction that we have. Not from this century, but for a lot of centuries before.
Sanda, can I mention something here? Because I actually think, now that we are talking so much about data here in the beginning, you know, my experience is that a lot of our clients, they have tons of data. And yes, we can improve the quality of data. We can definitely improve the systems by which we ask to collect the right kind of data and add all the indicators that you, Cynthia, also shared. But we cannot do that alone. We have to train and make sure that we have the right competences within the organizations to analyze this data, because it's not the data itself that is going to fix the problems. It's people, and we need different skill sets basically in most organizations to make sure that we ask the right questions, that we actually are able to provide the right insights, and it's a huge challenge.
Very interesting comment, because this is also matching one of my observations in the past years. We see that many bigger offices in architecture, urban design, that they start their own research departments because they see there is this need, and you really need other people. I just had a discussion with, maybe you know him, Adrian Gehl from West 8, who is our extraordinary professor here, last week about, well, what shall we do when it comes to involving these researchers? Because he also says, we need these people, and you guys, you have to educate them. So this is a very interesting topic. But of course, yeah, our discussion has now very much also been focusing on let's say the research, and but I'm of course also interested. So let's try to devote the next part of our talk more to what are we doing? What, you know, how do we design? How do we respond to all these indicators, to all these matters? And what I noticed, you know, your presentations were full of very interesting examples how things should be done, and so there's a lot going on about that in the discussion fora, and many people also came up with, let's say, their own solutions. You know, you really saw we have design thinkers here. They don't ask questions. They say, we should do this, we should do that. So that was really interesting to see here. But what I would be very interested in is, let's say, in terms of our design processes, you have both been talking about we should do more co-design, designing things together with people. And I think everybody subscribes to that because it has become a very broad movement. But I would be very interested in how are you doing this in times of COVID now? Because participatory design and planning is usually involving a lot of interaction with the local people, as you also showed, like from Argentina, and you do this a lot in Barcelona as well since many decades. So how are you doing this at the moment?
Well, I think from my side, I think it's what the city. So I mean, right now, everyone is adapting into this situation of the lockdown. Eventually, we're beginning to have activity. So I'm sure that I'm still not sure how it is going to make a strong incidence on the participatory processes, but what it is for sure is that has been an opportunity for all those cities that were having their plans over the table, and probably this make the catalyst, the impulse of becoming accelerate the implementation of certain things, even if it is related to sustainable mobility or to increase public spaces dedicated to citizens. So then regarding for this multidisciplinary approach of I think it's absolutely necessary. I mean, I'm an architect, but I have been working the last almost 20 years with a lot of people differently. I mean, geographers, biologists, engineers, and I think it's we should incorporate more and more these into our professional performance, because architects are important, yes, and our knowledge and our contribution to a lot of the discussion, it's very important, but it's not the only one. So it is necessary to open this mindset and have a more dialogue with other disciplines, for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, also in a practical sense, I also see in the chats that people say, yeah, we can do citizen science, but this is not so much about citizen science, but it is designing together with the people. And when you have to do social distancing, can you really do it? So, this is the question that I'm asking, and I think you're doing it in practice, at least. Yeah.
But I think, well, maybe Helle will, but I think that now what we experience, everyone, it's some exercise of solidarity and this a little bit like this entrepreneurship because of a very restricted situation. So all of a sudden we realize as human species that we create these relations and we manage the way to solve if it is an issue of going to I mean, especially on buildings or on community. I mean, I think in different countries we have heard a lot of solidarity experiences that probably before it wasn't possible to believe that they were.
Yeah. I see in the chats that there's also some tips coming up for which tools to use. I see Miro coming up. We have tried with Miro. Well, it is somehow intuitive, but not intuitive enough. So we noticed we had to take people by the hand. But maybe Helle, you have some experiences using online tools to make online communities co-designing, co-creating together. What is your experience with that?
Well, first of all, I must say that is the one thing that I've been so incredibly sort of happy about in this process. Actually, it's the amount of innovation and testing happening. It's really, really inspiring to see how new tools are coming up, and And just within Gehl, as an organization, we are spanning 9 different time zones. We have offices in Copenhagen, New York, and San Francisco. And I feel we've never been collaborating as closely as we do now. It feels like that with our clients and so forth, that cities as well, developers, foundations, NGOs, and so forth, the whole society is making leaps into digitalization that would have otherwise taken us 3 or 4, 7 years. Yeah. So when it comes to, we are testing all kinds of tools. First and foremost, of course, when it comes to engaging people, we are testing online survey formats where we use social media to target different audiences, with very much in collaboration with our client groups. Some cities actually have groups shaped already that they can engage on in different online survey formats. But otherwise, we use our own followers on social media and our clients' followers and so forth to reach as many as we can. So online surveys has been something that we've done quite a bit. We are also using something called Maptionaire, which is also an online platform that is more map-based. We are then further into the process. We are testing all kinds of collaborative platforms, from Google Worksheets to Vimeo to Zoom. We have been facilitating workshops, collaborative workshops on Zoom, with breakout spaces and breakout rooms where people then go out into these virtual breakout sessions and collaborate and brainstorm using Google Maps and using Google Sheets, using sort of virtual Post-it notes and what have you. And then we come together in group formats and collect all the ideas and so forth. So we really try to do what we usually do in terms of ideation and idea creation. And then I would say I really hate the term social distancing. I talk about physical distancing.
Me too.
Because we really should not be socially distant. We need more than ever to create new types of commons. So we are still, I talked in my presentation about this revival of a localism. And we see, despite the fact that we need to provide safe physical distancing between people, we do see this increased activity levels actually outdoors in public spaces, at least in the cities where you are still allowed to go outside. So we are still prototyping. We are prototyping a lot of different things: temporary bike lanes, temporary pedestrian streets, temporary outdoor seating areas for restaurants, temporary places where people can, shops can sell things and sell their goods outdoors. Temporary ways of managing lines of people standing for certain things. Right now we are testing a new COVID kiosk where you can go and self-test in marginalized communities in the US, where people don't have access to car or don't have access to the hospital. So rather than the people going to the hospital, we are bringing the hospital to the people and using the public space as a connecting tissue. So I'm really, really happy to see all this prototyping. And I actually think that that's a way of engaging. It's a way of engaging people real time in solutions that are close to them, and where they can actually get in dialogue with the designers directly and vote with their feet, but also engage in topics like food systems or access to health that is otherwise a very, very difficult conversation to have. Yeah. And then based on those, of course, we try to engage our clients in mapping the results. So again, we use the public live data as an impact measurement. And then we go back and discuss those results virtually with our clients. So I would say we are doing all kinds of things, even though we need to be at a safe physical distance from one another.
Yeah, but you also mentioned that you are doing such work, let's say, in the US, in communities where people have less access to all sorts of amenities. And there was also a question in the chat before, like, how are you doing, all this kind of work in the favelas, actually, or whichever neighborhoods in which disenfranchised people live, where the economic status is much more difficult, etc., and where people also, they don't have access to online tools, etc. Like, in the past, there has been quite a movement, and I think also Barcelona has a long history with that. In let's say in the working class areas, where you did a lot of co-design together with the citizens. But how is this done now? Because we cannot reach these people with digital tools. Many of them simply don't have the connection. They maybe have a TV, if at all. So how is that done?
But I, in my opinion, I think that the self-organization, I think it's mainly this aspect, how communities self-organize themselves and find the tools that they have nearby. I mean, even that it doesn't have to be digital, even though I think the digital access is more wider than what we think. Yeah? And there's a lot of uses that are more implemented than we think. But in my opinion, it's more about self-organization, community self-organization.
Yeah. So empowerment is still a very important word.
Yeah.
Okay. Well.
Yeah, I would say that that's why I think you always need to engage not only digital but also locally through some kind of presence. And if we can't be there ourselves, we always collaborate with local partners who are specialists in their own place and really know people, know stakeholders, can actually be visible and go out into the areas. I think that's important. We need to play as many tangents, you could say, as possible when it's about engagement, because the more different ways we are trying to do it, the more we will actually be able to engage. Some people find it very naturally to use social media. Other people just go onto web pages. Other people, again, come to classical meetings. A fourth group might come to an event in their own local neighborhood. Families might only come for pancakes and ice creams and sort of some kind of Sunday thing, because the rest of the week they're too busy. We really need to think about so many different ways of engaging a community. There's never sort of a one size fits all.
Yeah, I agree. And according, for example, you mentioned the schools. I think the schools, it's a great link and a bridge to different ages, families, but you can establish different types of strategies. One could be like through the schools, but then also with the youth through university. So it depends.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's hope that we can also involve, let's say, broader parts of the population into all these activities also in the future. And I think that the experiments in the public spaces, they are definitely a very interesting way to do so, and one way to go, I think, to make people aware of what can be done to get the cars out of the city, what can be done to improve the local microclimate. etc. So we can think of a lot of different ways to do that. Now I would like to sort of scale up the discussion a little bit to the topic of this conference. So I would be very interested in, the issues regarding the post-carbon city, and now what has happened through COVID, what are our experiences? And I saw also in the chats that many, let's say, old discussions somehow arose again about the city systems. How should the cities respond to, the green systems? How should they interact? The rural-urban issue arose. So, Cynthia, I think I would like to start to ask you about that. Because you explicitly mentioned that in your talk, this tension between the urban and the rural, and well, whatever it means, it has been in the discussion all the time since the Garden City movement, or even earlier. So I think already when the landscape park started, the ornamental farm was already a response to an urban development. So when we think about the needs of the post-carbon city, the question is, how dense do our cities have to be? How green do they have to be? Do they have to have a lot of transport routes still, or are we actually transporting ourselves in other ways? So I would first like to have Cynthia, because you really expressed that really as a topic in your talk, to think about that, and first, what does it mean in the sense of the low carbon city, but then also in relation to COVID?
Yes. No, this is something that I'm really interested in the last years, and actually I'm working on a project on that, because I think that as I said, we have been focusing a lot on cities, and it is true, because it's the main places where we allocate a lot of people, where we leave a lot of people, but at the same time we create a huge impact. So what I'm still losing on this picture, it's what about the rest of the territory? Because even though that we have all urban gardens, and we have a lot of, this is not going to give us the food for everyone. So we still need the fields, we still need the farmers, and we still need to have but we need them in a dignity way. So if you see it in this upper level, so I think there is a huge inequality among the territories. So we need to deal with this, and we deal not precisely urbanizing everything. Not that every human settlement has to be in a urban condition or in a urban establishment. So, and that was the aim of the structure of the presentation. I wasn't. The indicators were more precisely that this has been the mindset that probably we have been following, but we need to also. It's good and forms part of analysis and a diagnosis method that you can have. But moreover that, we need to think about the real impact that we are creating on the territories in terms of climate change. And if we talk about resilience, we need to be resilient. We need to be also the rest of the cities. And rural, it is the very contrast part, no? Where it is precisely the city allocate the primary sector, allocate the industry, all those activities that we don't like, because it's not the livable way that we understand just behind us. So we live it in all these territories, and we see that there's a very few people living there, but they're not enough to manage. So for me, it's something that it is necessary to establish for the 21st century. We need to redefine this relation, and not to think that the rural it has to be only designated for these type of activities. And there's a lot of organizations working on that. In Europe, in OECD has its rural policy unit. So the question is how we address this. I mean, just the development enough at the same time that the city is aiming to have more nature, aiming to have more greening, as you said. I mean, it's a sense of how we naturalize. Actually, Cerda has this phrase that naturalize more the city, and and make a little bit more rural the rural. No, so it has to be a little bit more balanced. So, in my opinion, right now it brings a huge opportunity, but it has to be also thought in a sustainable thinking, ecological approach. Not that the second. What it has been done in the 60s and 70s, that, okay, I have my apartment in the city and I have my house, my beautiful house outside. No, and this is precisely the risk. So I think that we should, as we experience this diverse use of public space, for example, we are learning that the streets are not only for walking and driving, and we can experience different ways of using public space. We can experience different lifestyles on the rural or in the urban. And now digitalization will open more these, we make more closer. There's a lot of things still pending, but I think that it's something that it's worth it to think about.
Yeah. Helle, how would you reflect on this? Because I think, Cynthia is making a point of, let's naturalize our cities, make them more ecological, and your office works mostly, let's say, in very urban environments, and I think the project you showed from Lille was already pointing in such a direction. But what is your philosophy about this?
Well, I think there is no doubt that existing cities need to be more green. We have definitely seen under this COVID pandemic and the COVID crisis that the cities that already have a lot of bicycle infrastructure, cities that already have alternatives to the car and to the public transportation, for that matter, cities that have plenty of access to local green spaces for where people can have access to relief. Those cities actually are doing better than the ones that cannot offer those types of infrastructures and those types of spaces. We've also seen from earlier research that the types of cities that have this type of public space infrastructure that I'm talking about also have a better social resiliency, a better can better recover from climate hazards and other things. So definitely there is no doubt, I think, that we need to move more cities in the direction of active mobility infrastructures, more green spaces. When we look at climate change also and climate adaptation and so forth, just in our part of the world where Copenhagen is based, downdraft is increasing with 30%. So we need to have more street trees, more climate adaptation in all of our streets, in fact, to cope with all that extra water. So that's happening no matter what, you could say. Having said all that, I am not a fan of spreading out cities, and I don't think that we will go back to everyone now leaving the city centers and going to live on the countryside because of COVID. I actually think we need to strike a balance where we can create very mixed use, compact urban form, similar to what I was trying to illustrate that we are working with in Lille, and at the same time ensure green spaces within that urban form and within that urban fabric. We know, all of us who have researched urban form and cities, that places like Barcelona, as you mentioned, Sanda, is the densest or one of the densest places in the world, and they don't have a lot of high rises, for example. So density is not necessarily the same as building a lot of towers and then having immense amounts of green space in between. We can work with consolidated urban form that can bring people closer to one another and ensure a public life, a walkability, and a connectedness between people, but at the same time, an access to high quality public space. And I would argue that it's better to have a small local park very close to you than having an enormous park 10 kilometers away if you can't access it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But I think absolutely. But this is a point that this is from the point of view of a urban life, and absolutely the composition of the cities should follow this path. No more the sufficient compactness to allow all these functionality. But the thing is that there's a very small an amount of people that live in small villages, and they should be focused in a differently way. This is a point that we're very focused on the urban, as everything had to be finished and ending on a urban, and I think it's not only that. Most of the people will live on urban, yes, but there's another. It's like a vulnerable territories that we should focus differently. This is a point.
Yeah, there were also questions from the public in the chats asking, can mega cities be resilient to all these threats? Because mega cities, they depend on a high amount of lifts. And when you have a lot of lifts, well, then how do you want to do physical distancing? So, the accessibility that we're talking about of all the public spaces and better outdoor life, the issue is when we are cramming a lot of people in these spaces, let's say under the COVID scenarios, we have a problem, be they stacked in buildings or be they very near to each other in public spaces. So I can only speak about the experiences my colleagues had in Amsterdam. When they were allowed to go outside, you could hardly go into the streets because there were too many people. So this is, and I see that slowly we have to sort of round up our extremely interesting discussion, because I think we could go on about, should we live, more physically distanced in the countryside and still be connected to the city in a digital way, or should we, live in a condensed way in the city and make much better use of the outdoor spaces and give them much more quality, which is nowadays still a huge problem. That is why Gehl is doing so well, I think. Amongst other things, of course, you do very much high quality work, of course. But what I'm wondering, and what I would like you to reflect on to finish this discussion, is now that we have seen this COVID things happening, do you think we have to rethink the way we design our cities? Or do you think we should say, well, probably, and this is the positive, optimistic scenario, we will have a vaccine sometime and it will go over, and let's focus on designing post-carbon cities, because the principles are different. The post-carbon city is dense, it is trying to save space, to make short routes and so forth. But let's say the COVID city is probably a bit more physically distant. So what is your view on these issues, ladies?
Well, in my opinion, I think that density has a limit. I mean, we cannot overcrowd a territory, that's for sure, because finally you will have these opposite results. But sure, I think we should take the opportunity, as in other moments of the history, to make changes for better. So if we already know that public spaces, livable spaces, that with a people-oriented, I think we should enhance and encourage this aspect.
And I definitely would encourage that same view. I would say we need to follow this trend of localism and strengthen the local core, so the local nodes within the mega cities and within the mega regions, you could say. I'm excited about the fact that in the recent studies that we have done and that Arab have done and others looking into workplace and changes within big corporations, we see now that 60% of current European workers, they would like to consider having a more flexible life moving forward, working also from home, not necessarily all the time, but certain days. 60%. You know, things like that will change the way we think about work life and our need for commute. And maybe we don't need to travel as much as we've done before. Maybe we can actually work closer in co-working locations, closer to where people live. And we can think differently about those things. And that, I think, is an opportunity to strengthen the local centers, the local nodes, think more distributed, rather than centralizing all services in one center.
Yes, and I think what is also becoming very apparent is that due to many activities had to be shifted outdoors, be it the gyms or be it, I don't know what kind of classes for painting, singing, whatever. A lot of people are now doing a lot of hobbies outdoors that they before didn't think about. And this is also giving a new boost to an exciting public life, I think. So these
Absolutely.
things, yeah. Well, then let me just try to conclude in 2 minutes what we have discussed today. So first of all, again, thank you so much, Helle and Cynthia, for your contributions and for your very inspiring keynotes. I think from this discussion, we noticed that, in the first place, it's important to conduct proper research, to use good tools to assess our spaces, and maybe that the existing tools like BREEAM, LEED, etc., that they should be extended, that they should also get more used when we are talking about assessing outdoor spaces and also assessing the plans for outdoor spaces. It's not only about what we have now, but how will they perform in the future? But what was also very clear is that still we have to make very good site analysis. We have to do local observations, and we have to start working from these starting points. What was also interesting is that researching people in the design and planning offices are getting quite useful to provide, let's say, a good analytical basis, and also to actually assess the designs together with the designer. So I think this means something for the way how we are organizing our profession and also the education. Well, and then of course we came into the discussion how to design our cities, what COVID has changed, and what has become, I think, very obvious is maybe not that COVID itself will change the way we design cities, maybe less than it has been in like 150 years ago when we redesigned the total underground of our cities with the sewage systems, etc. COVID is asking for other measures and probably much lighter ones. But what we have seen is that it has really accelerated a lot of processes that we have been trying to promote for a long time, like, you know, not traveling that much, so not going to the office that often anymore. This is obviously, as Helle just said, going to stay with us for longer, that outdoor spaces for meeting and for new activities are probably getting much more importance. And that it's very important that we still continue to design all these spaces together with the local communities, and that we also try to involve a lot of new tools, digital tools, but that we combine it also with, let's say, physical get-together. So I think that this discussion today was actually sort of giving me two major terms, which was about the physical and the virtual world. That this connection is going to change, or it has changed a lot, and I feel that this will change the way how we live in cities, and it will be terribly important to keep up with this, and it will be very exciting to design with these new developments in mind. With this, I would like to round off and thank you so much for your attention. And if you still have any question or comments, please use the chat and we are there for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sanda, and thank you, Jorge.
Bye-bye.